Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, I pray everyone is doing well and had a good Fajr Salat. Alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought us to verse number 5 in Surah al-Mā'idah. And this is an important verse in the Quran, speaking about halal food and also speaking about who we can marry as Muslims. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins after A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. The translation reads, "Today all good things have been made lawful for you. The food of the people of the book is lawful for you as your food is lawful for them. So are chaste, believing women, as well as chaste women of the people who were given scripture before you, as long as you give them their bride gifts and marry them, not taking them as secret mistresses." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here in this verse is speaking about two important aspects of our religion, our food and our marriage. And it's important for us as Muslims to always consider how we are living our lives. Is our lives consistent with Islam, with Islamic law, with the Sharia? And how that impacts our conduct, our lifestyle, and who we associate with. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins this verse says, "Al-yawma uhilla lakum at-tayyibat." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "I have made halal for you at-tayyibat." What is tayyibat? Anything that is good. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this is haram, when He says, for example, that the khamr is haram, that alcohol, intoxicants are haram, then there's something that's bad for us, that it takes away our mind, our ability to be conscious, to make good decisions. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited for us certain types of animals, for example, the khinzir, as we'll see later on, then there's something that's not necessarily good and nutritious for us as human beings. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins this verse and says, everything I have made halal is tayyibat. And the overwhelming majority of things are halal, in terms of our food, in terms of our relations. And this is important because if you look at other religious traditions, there are so many restrictions in terms of the food. How the food has to be cooked, what animals, how exactly, very precisely. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made things easy for us. And then He explains, وَطَعَامُ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ أُحِلًّا لَكُمْ وَطَعَامُكُمْ أُحِلًّا لَهُمْ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the food of the people of the book, that they've been given scriptures, that is halal for you. And your food is also halal for you. So what does this mean in practicality? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that your food, especially the meat, that you slaughter and you say the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is halal. And the food of the people of the book. Now here, there is a debate among scholars, as many of you know, that who are the people of the book? Majority of scholars say this is the Jews and the Christians. And then they say, even then, how are they slaughtering the meat? Are they when they slaughter the meat, do they say some words of shirk? Do they do it in a proper way? Is it consistent with Islamic law? In other verses in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَأْكُلُوا مِمَّا لَمْ يَذْكُرِ اسْمُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says very clearly, do not eat any meat which the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not mentioned. And this is important that when you put something in your body, you want to make sure it's halal. Because that food is nourishing you. It's giving you energy. It's sustaining your life. And whatever that food is, you want to make sure that it's halal, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would approve of it. That your ibadah, that your worship, that your zakah, everything you do from that food is blessed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here you see that there is a debate among scholars. Which verse came first? Was it the verse allowing for the food of the Ahl Kitab? Or is the verse saying, don't eat anything except the name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned? And the majority of scholars say this verse in Surah al-Mā'idah is later, and that the food of the people of the book is lawful. But there are also other opinions that say, only eat the food of the Muslims. And this is important also in terms of how we relate to our community. We are Muslims here, we're a minority, and it's important for us to support Muslim businesses, Muslim grocery stores. When I grew up here in the 90s, there was only maybe one halal grocery store, or one place that you would go and eat halal kebab. Now, mashallah, you find it everywhere, even mainstream grocery stores. And so it's important for us to support the Muslim community and make sure we have our own institutions that are producing halal food for us. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then continues and says, وَالْمُحْصَنَاتُ مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنَاتِ. then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, is halal for me, the what? The muhsanat. What is the muhsanat? The people who are chaste, the women that are chaste and do not engage in zina. Because if someone marries someone who is a zani, then there is no order in that society. That you don't know, you look at a child, you don't know who their father and mother is. You don't know who is going to take care of them. Who will they inherit from? So part of our deen is we marry people who are muhsanat. That they are loyal in the relationship, they're chaste, they are not engaging in zina, for the stability of their family and the community. وَالْمُحْسَنَاتُ مِنَ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْكِتَابَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the muhsanat, the chaste ones, of the people of the scriptures before you. So you see the preference here. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, first the believers, marry the believing women. And then it says, you are allowed to marry the women of the different scriptures. Who are these people? The majority of scholars say it's the Jews and the Christians. The Jews and the Christians that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows the marriage of those women. And then we see that there's a debate here among the scholars, especially in different contexts. So you see a verse in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا الْمُشْرِكَاتِ حَتَّى يُؤْمِنَّا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not marry the mushrikat. Do not marry the polytheists, the people who engage in shirk, except until they believe. So there's a debate among the scholars. Aren't Christians, don't they engage in shirk? How can you marry a Christian, but then at the same time they're engaging in shirk? So majority of scholars, based on this, they say, yes, it's allowed for a Muslim man to marry a Christian or Jewish woman, but they say the preference is for the Muslim woman. And someone may ask, well, how about a Muslim woman? Can she marry a Christian or Jewish man? The majority of scholars, they say no, because there is no verse in the Quran that's saying that they're allowed to do it. But at the same time, there's no verse that's prohibiting a Muslim woman from doing that. But the consensus of the Sunni, of the different madhahib, is that this is only permissible for the man. However, even, I was, subhanAllah, reading many fatwa in preparation for this, they say even for the Muslim man, many scholars say it's makruh, or not recommended. Especially if you're living in the West as a Muslim. Because if you marry someone of a different faith, in a society where the dominant religion is not Islam, then there is a greater propensity that the children will not grow up and identify with their faith. And what is the principles of our deen? لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says the purpose, one of the ayah of the marriage, is that you find sakina in your spouse. Muwadda, intense love, not just hub, but widda. The idea of you really love your partner. Wa rahma, and mercy. That yes, we have power in the relationship, but we are kind and gentle, like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the scholars, one of the things they ask, and we say this to our youth, our young people, when you're trying to find a spouse, yes, there's the permissible and there's certain things, but what can really truly find sakina, tranquility, love, and mercy is someone that shares your values, someone that shares your faith. You want someone who you pray with the 5 prayers. You want someone you can fast with, you can wake up and do suhoor and then do iftar. You want someone you can go and travel and do hajj. That we encourage our youth to marry of our faith. And it may happen that someone will find someone of a different faith, whether in college or at work, and then we invite those people to Islam. We know many people in our community that they weren't necessarily initially thinking about being a Muslim, but they met a Muslim. And that relationship developed, and they learned that, I love this person, I like this person because of their principles, because of their deen, because they stand up for what is right, and I want to be part of that community. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, إِذَا آتَيْتُمُهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, you're allowed to marry among the believing women and the believing of the previous scriptures, but you have to give them their mahr. And this is important because in our communities, many times it becomes symbolic. That we say, we make an announcement at the wedding, we're going to give a big mahr. But in reality, the wife, the bride, never receives it. And here it's clear in the language, آتَيْتُمُوهُنَّ. It means in the feminine. Give them, the women, not their fathers. And this is another issue within our communities, is sometimes, yes, the mahr is given, but the bride herself, she never sees it. It goes to her family, or it goes to her father or her mother. And then it continues, آتَيْتُمُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ. It's theirs. This is their mahr. It doesn't belong to anyone else. مُحْسِنِينَ غَيْرَ مُسَافِحِينَ. Then make sure that these women are chaste and they're loyal and committed in the relationship. وَلَا مُتَّخِذِي أَخْدَانٍ. And don't take women or men as a mistress, a secret lover. And this is one of the beautiful things about Islam. In Islam, we do not believe in secret relationships. When someone gets married, it's done, we have a walima. Walima, what is the purpose of the walima? People can just go to the courthouse and get married. The purpose of the walima is you're announcing this to the community. It's a celebration. You're telling the community that these two people are now married and they have rights and responsibilities to one another. When people do these secret relationships, then they avoid the rights and responsibilities. And it's an opportunity for abuse. That we believe in Islam that there is maintenance, that you have to do nafaqat, you have to support one another. That when a partner dies in the relationship, then there is inheritance. That if a child comes out of this relationship, then the parents are responsible for them. But if you do these secret relationships, then we don't know who is responsible. And it becomes hard to hold the community accountable. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, do not engage. If you're going to get married, then do it publicly. Have the witnesses. Have the people testify that these two people want to be together in a state of love and mercy and tranquility. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to conclude this verse and this session, says, وَمَا يَكْفُرْ بِالْإِيمَانِ فَقَدْ حَبِطَ عَمَلُهُ وَهُوَ فِي الْآخِرَةِ مِنَ الْخَاسِرِينَ. SubhanAllah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala connects this with iman, what we just talked about, eating halal and marrying halal. It could just say, this is a good thing, do it. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا يَكْفُرْ. Whoever disbelieves in faith, this is part of our deen, about who we have relationship with and what we consume and put in our bodies. Then our actions, our deeds, habita, they will go to waste. And then in the hereafter, when we meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we will be among the losers. SubhanAllah. This is a powerful verse. Powerful verse in that if we do not act in a righteous manner, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not accept our deeds. That our deen, our religion is not just saying La ilaha illallah. Our religion is also what we consume on a daily basis, and it's also who we marry and the lifestyle we choose. So brothers and sisters in Islam, to conclude, we see in this one verse the importance of the Ahl Kitab. That in Surah al-Mā'idah we'll see various stories from Isa alayhi salam to his disciples, to his companions. And we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sees Islam, that our religion is a continuation. And there's exceptions made in terms of our food, in terms of our marriage, because there is some similarity. However, the majority of Muslims and scholars, they say, prioritize your community, prioritize the Muslims, prioritize the food of the Muslims, prioritize the women and men of the Muslim community, people that you share values with. Also, we see the importance of the mahr. And this is something sometimes when we talk to our youth and young people and our communities, people forget this. They just, let's just write something in the mahr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says you're allowed to marry if you give them the mahr. So think reasonably and realistically, what is the proper mahr? Sometimes people give astronomical numbers that are unrealistic. But in part of our deen is that the mahr is something real and tangible that you're giving to the bride herself. And lastly, we see the importance of halal lifestyle. This is something, mashallah, has grown in the last 10, 20 years. That whether it's in terms of our food, whether in terms of who we marry, whether in terms of our travel, we should always think to ourselves, how can we live a halal lifestyle? And this is important because the haram is easy. It's easy, subhanAllah, to go to the store and consume something that's haram. It's easy to be in a relationship that's haram. It's easy to go and engage in financial transactions that have a riba. It's so easy to do that. And that's why we, as a community, love one another and built this community, so we can reinforce our values and make sure that we are continuing to live in a halal way. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the ability to live a halal lifestyle. وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ.